We want to embed insight into our work across Somerset, and so we want to do that through learning, collaborating and taking action. So our focus really is understanding our impact, developing a learning culture and using evidence to make decisions. So this one today is really about that, understanding our impact. How do we go about understanding our impact, and how can we do that through evaluation? So today our aims are to understand why and when we might want to plan a programme evaluation, understand some of the differences between different definitions. So there's often quite a lot of different words used in evaluation and they can get a bit confusing. So I'm going to talk you through the different parts of an evaluation and what they're defined as. Then we're going to have some practical experience of actually planning one. And hopefully at the end, you'll feel a bit more confident about doing an evaluation in your programme or project. So I'm quickly going to go through why, then go through the definitions and have a little quiz, and then talk through the steps that we will take to planning an evaluation. Then we'll go through those steps in like more detail and in more practical ways. So those steps will be understanding your project, measuring your impact and using your findings, and then we'll kind of wrap it up at the end. Does that all sound okay for everyone? Yeah. So if we go back to the training that we had before, evaluation is really about helping us ask and answer some fundamental questions. Making a difference? Are we reaching the people we want to reach? Does our work lead to change? Can we improve things? But it's also not just about what works, but kind of why things come about and how changes are influenced by what's going on in the real world. So things like the cost of living crisis, COVID is a big example of that. Things around housing, so loads of other things will kind of give context to the work that we're doing and maybe the reasons why people react in particular ways. So evaluation tries to capture some of that as well and take some of those things on board. And it's also really about us using learning to improve our work. So learning about what changes are happening because of our work and understanding how and why it does or doesn't happen. So like what's going on and why, really. In the previous training, I talked about the 3 different types of evaluation. There's process, there's impact, and there's developmental. So process is around how an intervention is working and if we're delivering it as planned. Impact is about the what comes out of what we're doing, so the changes brought about by the programme. And developmental is more kind of an innovative way of doing evaluation. So it's often more around new projects or new ways of doing things and how we might capture that information. Today, we're mainly going to be looking at impact evaluation, but some of the questions you might have or the thoughts you might have when you're kind of doing the more practical exercises, they might be more around process as well. So it might be about how you've done things as a programme and why you're doing them. So just keep those 2 in mind, really, the impact and the process evaluation, but we can talk those through as well as we kind of do the more practical things. Hi, Jo. So why are we doing evaluation? So we want to design services. We also want to improve what we're doing. We want to demonstrate the efficacy of our work. We, answering questions about what works and providing robust evidence on the success of that. We also want to share our ideas and build on our evidence base. So if we've got something that's working really well, we want to kind of share that and share what about that was working, share it with our partners, with other people at SASP, more widely across the Active Partnership Network. And finally, we want to maintain accountability. So in my opinion, that should be the last reason why we do it. Accountability for funders, but often it's the reason that we do it because we have to do it. But it's nice to think of that as something that we kind of do at the end. It would be really nice to get to a place where we're doing evaluation, because we see a lot of the value in it, and for the 4 things above that, rather than feeling like we just have to do it because the funder's asking for it. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of planning a programme evaluation, I'm just going to talk through some definitions of things that are really important in an evaluation. And feel free, if you have any questions on this bit, to put your hands up if you want anything clarifying. So there's a lot of confusion often around impact and what it means and all the different parts to getting to impact. And in general, each programme, project, any piece of work that we do at SAS follows a bit of a journey, and that traces our work over time, and there's kind of different stages in that journey. So the first one is inputs, and to put it really simply, it's like what we need to be able to do something. And so that could be things like money, funding, staff, so we actually need people, capacity to do things, knowledge as well, so like the knowledge of the staff. So it's like, what other core do we need to be able to deliver something? Then activities is what we actually do. So for example, that could be a program to support young people to be more active, and we do one-to-one mentoring and we do group sessions. It's that simple. It's kind of what are we doing? So it's like the different things that we're doing to support those young people. Then the outputs are really how we measure those activities. So it's the results of our activities. So outputs are just numbers, and they are basically just related to those activities. So it's the number of sessions, the number of different one-to-one mentors that we've matched, the number of people that took part. It's that kind of basic for outputs. So for example, it could be that we ran 10 group sessions and 25 people came along across the whole thing. So it's really just measuring the number of activities that we've got, and then the number of people that come along to those activities. Where you get to the more, I guess, interesting stuff, in my opinion, is the outcomes. So that's the changes that we hope to achieve for those people that come along. So they generally occur in the short to the medium term, and they are things, how I like to think about it, they are things that either increase or decrease because those people came along to one of our programs. So for example, people increase their activity levels because they came along, or they decrease their loneliness because they came along. So the outcomes are really related to those people that are coming along to our group sessions or program. And so the difference really between outputs and outcomes: outputs are the numbers of sessions, the number of people; the outcomes are what's happening to those people because they've come along. And then the impact, right at the end, is the bigger, wider thing that's happening in society because of this programme. So often there's a bit of an accountability thing here, that we can't say that because we ran this one programme for 10 people, that there's all these big changes in society. But what we can say is that because we ran this programme for 10 people, these are the things that we hope would happen in the longer term for those people that come along, and therefore in society. So typically they're long-term things, and they would be things like improved health or improved feeling of a part of a community. So they're kind of long-term things that those people feel, but it's not just them that feel it, it's bigger than that. It's kind of changes in society. So often impacts we don't directly link to particular programs, but they are things that we want to keep an eye on and think about how our program might lead to those things. So for example here, if we go back to the example of 10 young people being supported on a program, and the aim of the program was to improve physical activity for those, we hope that impacts on those people would be improved physical health over the long term. So they're the kind of different stages, I suppose, of impact, and how our work kind of feeds through to that. I'll just pause there. Does that make sense to people? Or not? Yeah. So now I've got a little quiz for you. So for these, it would be great if you could work out whether they're an output or an outcome, and I'm hopefully going to do this through Teams. So you should now see a poll that's come up on your screen. So that first one, 15 children attended. Please select whether you think it's an output or an outcome. So we've got 71% saying output and 29% outcome. So it is an output, that one. And that's because it's counting the number of people that have come along to something rather than what's happened to those people. And then the next one. Everyone's got that one, 100%. Are people feeling more confident? Again, outcome. Next one, we delivered 3 one-to-one sessions. Yeah, output. And then the final one, volunteers and participants felt less lonely. Outcome. Yeah, great. So it's just a way of really thinking about the difference between outputs and outcomes, and I think everyone got those, which is great. So now I'm just going to talk through the steps to planning a program evaluation. So create a little kind of diagram here. What we did in the last training was around using insight to decide on where to work and with who. For those of you that have come along so far, and then now what we're going to do is we're going to move towards that program setup, planning for impact stage, and thinking about how we plan for measuring our impact for an evaluation. While we're planning for something, we're also going to consider how we measure and then how we share it as well. So we're planning for the whole cycle, but we're not actually going to be measuring, we're not actually going to be sharing, we're just planning for it. So we're kind of creating a bit of a plan for what we want to do. And there are 3 key steps. So the first is understanding your project, the second is measuring your impact, and then the third is using your findings. Understanding your project, there are 4 kind of key things to think about, and I've called them the 4 W's. It's why, who, what, and when. So why is thinking about why you're doing this project. What evidence do you have to prove this need? So what insight, for example, are you looking at, and what's made you decide to do this thing? What evidence do you have to prove that we need to do that? And then what's the link to Somerset Move? So where does it fit in with our strategy and the system-wide strategy? Who do you want to help? Who is this aimed at? Who's the target audience? But also, who are you going to work with to deliver this? What partners? Who within SAS? Who else do you need to kind of get involved? And who wants to see the results of your work? So who might be interested in what comes out of what you do? Then the what is really, what are you doing? So what are the activities that you're delivering? How many? What outcomes and impact would you like to see? And what do you need to be able to do that? So what inputs, what finances, what capacity, what knowledge do you need to be able to deliver what you're doing? And then when will it all take place? Where will it take place? How long is it running for? Thinking about when is there kind of a final deadline for it, or is it kind of rolling? So thinking about just a bit of a time frame really for your project. So I'm going to go through an example, and then we're going to go out to breakout rooms, and you can do these yourselves in a project that you decide that you want to pick. So I've picked Move More Together to talk through. So why are we doing Move More Together? So we did a survey of the shielding list when COVID happened, and there was an adverse impact of the pandemic on the physical and mental health for older people and people with long-term health conditions. We saw that they suffered not just physically, but also mentally, with increased levels of social isolation and loneliness. And Move More Together also aligns with SAS's vision, supporting and motivating, but also community activities, so diversifying opportunities and creating activities with people who find it harder to be active. So who are we wanting to help? So Move More Together is an interesting one because we want to look at both participants and volunteers. So participants are inactive adults over 50, and volunteers are people who are around kind of normal office hours who'd like to work with someone to help them get active. Who else are we working with? So we're working with some other areas of SAS, for example, health walks. And we want to share some of our findings externally. We want to share it with volunteers, with funders. So there's a wide variety of people who would be interested in our work. So what are we doing? We're matching participants with a volunteer that can meet them regularly and provide support to help them get moving. We're going to recruit, train, support and provide resources for volunteers. So we need someone to do that. We need a manager and resources. We're going to aim for 10 matches a year. The outcomes we'd like to see are improved confidence, a decrease in loneliness, and increasing activity. And the overall impact we want to see is there'll be improved physical health, improved mental well-being, and improved sense of community. And that's not just for the participants, but also some of those are for the volunteers as well. And then when will it take place? So had a soft launch in September, initially focused in Sedgemoor. Currently, there's no time constraints around how long a partnership will take place, but that's something we might consider in the future. And volunteers and participants commit to meet regularly on a one-to-one basis, ideally weekly, to take place during normal office hours. And the duration will depend on individual needs between volunteers and participants. Does that all make sense to everyone? Talking that through? Yeah. So now we're going to go over to you. So we're going to have breakout rooms. I'm just going to check that we have got. I might just so we should have breakout rooms, and some will have 3 people in, and one will have 2 people in. And so what we're going to do is go out to those breakout rooms, and between you pick a project. It could be one that one of you is working on that you'd like to go through, and then go to the Jamboard for your breakout room. So you should have a number for your breakout rooms, and on Jamboard, the first slide will show you the first slide will show you the table with why, who, what, and when. And then the next slide this is for breakout room 1 for you to fill in, breakout room 2 to fill in, breakout room 3 to fill in. So pick the breakout, the right slide for you, and fill those in. And I will dip in and out basically of the breakout rooms. And you can also chat to me in the chat on the Teams. If you have a question and you want me to come into your breakout room, then I can come in and join. Before I go open the breakout rooms, does anyone have any questions? Is that all clear? Does that make sense? Yeah. Cool. So I'm going to open the rooms. How did everyone find that?
It's good.
Good, lots of nods. Would anyone like to go through theirs? I think we'll just go through one example. Is anyone keen to go through their example?
We can do it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Alex and Joyce.
We got this. Annabelle, do you mind sharing our
Shall I
Jamboard?
share? Yeah, of
Yes,
course.
please. Otherwise, I'll mess that bit up. Go on, Joseph. You take it away. You volunteered us, and I'll...
Okay. Oh, well, fair enough. That's fair enough. Okay. So yeah, I've learned a lot the last 15 minutes about different projects, because the challenge we had is we're working in very, very different areas, but we went with Alex's FA Girls Whistleblowers in Sedgemoor. So it's basically essentially just a junior football refereeing qualification, aimed looking at it to get the whole of year 6 up to year 9, so that age range. Yeah, so talk about the why initially. So it's mostly looking at the social and community development pillar of the Somerset Move strategy. So basically helping sort of give those young girls confidence to officiate in football and empower other girls to play the game. So there's been a lot of talk, obviously, with the Lionesses and everything about getting them playing, but actually, in order to play, they do need referees, and I think it's just equally an important qualification. It's offering sort of opportunities for both curricular and extracurricular activities. If we move on to the what, so the main inputs that we really need, we've got here. So we've got the funding, the classroom and the practical facilities in order to teach the course, the classroom to learning, and the pitch to do the practical sessions, the physical teacher training itself in order to run the course. As yeah, we've got the funding, not only just to run the course and the time it takes, but also the work resources and things like that. If we move on to the who's, yeah, like I said, looking at the highest capacity of 60 year 6 to 9s in the Sedgemoor area, specifically based at Bridgewater College. The people and organisations that will be involved, along with SAS, we're looking at sort of Somerset FA, Youth Sport Trust, the Barclays Football, getting an impact in it, and also England Schools potentially linking in as well. But also, not only are the students going to be what is the word I'm looking for? We've also got the parents and guardians and school staff as well taking an interest. With Alex working closely with the Sedgemoor Barclays Girls Strategic Lead, which is a good link for SAS to have, I think. And then looking at the when, it's a one-day event held in October. So the aim is with that one-day event, if we get the maximum 60 qualified, we can then get them to hopefully sort of lead sessions in the future and grow the scheme from there. And this is a lifelong qualification. So once you've got the qualification, you can continue to referee and hopefully progress up the levels. And yeah, and that was my knowledge of it. It was very quick. That's what I've learned in the last 10 minutes with Alex's direction. But yeah, I don't know if Alex, you have any more input on anything I have missed.
No, you nailed that, mate. Absolutely nailed it.
Thank you very much.
feel like you learned quite a lot, Joseph. In
Yeah, I
10
did,
minutes.
We had a good time.
Thank you for sharing that. That was good to hear, and good to hear you go through all the different sections. So what we're going to do now is we're going to have a break. We're going to have a 10-minute break. Come back at past. You can go and get a cup of tea, biscuit, something healthy. I should say a banana, shouldn't I, rather than biscuit. Anyway, and we'll come back at past, and then I'll talk you through the next stage, and we'll kind of go back into breakout rooms again. So yeah, if we all come back at past, I'll see you then. And I'll kind of stay on the line if you've got any questions in the meantime.
So Annabelle,
Yes.
So Curtis is now full-time, started on
Hey,
Monday, yeah. So he's going to do a half the time in Frome and then the other half in Glastonbury. So with similar objectives.
Yeah.
But I'm going to meet with him and use this, you know, training and the other training to really hone down and focus on, you know, learning what we've learned in Frome and then putting something together for Street in Glastonbury, and so that we can use the data. So and I know you've shown us how to do it, but can you just tell me where the best place to go to find that data within Glastonbury? We're looking at sort of like 9 to 16-year-olds.
Yeah.
And sort of like their activity levels, and if there are specific areas in Glastonbury we want to focus on, just so like I worked in Mendip for about 20 years, so where I think I know, but that, you know, may have changed, and I want that hard evidence to show why we pick certain areas. St Dunstan Schools is obviously having the OSF funding this time as well, so that will really help with their after school offer. But when I went to speak to them, they said they've got trouble with county lines, so there are like 5 different county lines that are operating in their area.
Really? Okay.
With young people, and they said when they talk to the kids just say, oh no, we don't want to do anything, we just like hang about, you know, like hanging about smoking weed and doing poppers and stuff like that, and it's in like a terrible state. So I really want to get sort of like some of that data, so that because there is so much to do, to hone down and say, right, in the next 6 months we're going to focus on this area because this is what we found, and then decide on a way where we can measure if we've had any impact, and so we can really narrow down, because I think that will really help focus, because there is so much to do.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. So for like at that kind of granular level geographically, so what Sport England are doing at the moment, so you know we have the Active Lives survey, and we've got the children and young people one. At the moment they've hired someone to do small area estimates, so we'll be able to get Active Lives data at LSOA, which is I think 1,000 to 3,000 people that fit into that kind of geographic region. And then MSOA, which I think is around 10,000, something like that. So you'll be able to get multiple ones within Glastonbury and Street, because they're big enough. And it will tell you activity levels, inactivity levels, I'm hoping by age. We need to double check with them, but they are doing it for the adults and for the children and young people, so we should be able to get it by age as well. So that's coming in early autumn, that data.
Okay.
Is that too late, or would that?
I mean, that'll probably work for anything that we do after January. I guess it doesn't for if we want to start
something.
I mean, we could just use, you know, we could do our own research and survey using the young people at St Dunstan School. You know, we could do our own sort of activity level, but again, it's so some of the work will be centered around the school and help, you know, from September on, you know, until December, it will be helping the school to make their school offer work. And sorting out curriculum stuff to make sure their after school stuff happens well, and getting some links and really building up something so children at the school are taking part. And so I suppose the next part of that then is linking them to see what's out there for when they're not at school or
Yeah,
after
outside
school,
of school.
out in the
Yeah.
community. And that's when I think, because there are like places like Windmill Hill Estate and estates in Glastonbury, that I've got, which I know they will have community groups. It's like finding out from them and choosing, which area to go to. Is it Moorlands? Is it Windmill Hill? Is it?
Yeah.
It's that where do we start from if there isn't anything already?
Yeah.
So
Glastonbury. Because we could go on the social indexes, couldn't we? Because that's there already, isn't it? In terms of wards and parishes, like what has the lowest?
Yeah, there would be, you could get things, so basically you could get things that are not, you can't get activity levels, but you would be able to get like social deprivation. And I haven't yet looked at the greatest needs stuff that Sport England sent through, but I think they sent it through this morning, didn't they?
it's Glastonbury Central, isn't it? Glastonbury Central. So around the Manor House Road area and then coming into town, that's the biggest area of deprivation. I've used little greens even in front of some like Paradise Road and stuff like that.
Joe, where is that evidence? Because like we know that, like I said, when we used to work at Mendip, we knew which areas to go to. I just want the data that says that.
I think the county council have got, so there's a huge list. I've not got the most up-to-date one, but there was a huge list and it showed you the exact areas and it showed you the exact streets and places that covered. I'm sure that if you asked Jake, he'd be able to get that information, or he'd know where to put his hands on it, because obviously that updates every year, doesn't it? Because I mean, Shepton did have a quintile one, but it hasn't anymore.
Annabelle, you must have that in your stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as I said, it's kind of, it's what measure is it that you want to look at? Because you can get it for deprivation. Yeah, you can definitely get it for like an area that's deprived, for example, or you can get it for an area that's around like social need. You just wouldn't be able to get it yet for activity levels.
Yeah, I suppose so using the current data, I'd want to compare. So if you have one that was high on social need and one that was high on deprivation, it would be compared against the number of young people that live there. Do you know what I mean? Because but actually if it's high need and sexual deprivation, but actually it was mostly 40 pluses that live there, that wouldn't be an area we go to. I suppose that's the best that we could do so far, isn't it?
Yeah, so you could do that. Yeah, you can definitely I'd definitely be able to find for you age and then deprivation at a granular level, geographically, and then you can work out from there. The census map might be able to do it, actually. My last training, I showed you that you can customly build a place, so you could draw it around Glastonbury or Glastonbury Street, and or draw it around a couple of streets around Glastonbury, like depending on where exactly you're thinking about, because it sounds like you've got an inclination from just knowledge of the area and working in the area, and it sounds like Joe does as well, but you could actually draw it and see and then select the data that you want to select, and it will tell you like the proportion of people that live there that are children and of different ages, the IMD, you can get health. You would be able to do that for that. That might be the easiest, like most visual way as well of doing it.
And is that up to date? So that's 2000.
That's 2021 is when they did the census. And that's the most up to date.
And then is there other stuff from the council that Joe was speaking about that that the council do, because they must do that in terms of planning and housing.
So why have they got all their money in it, Kaylee?
So like where are they getting their information? Are they getting it from the census, or they do their own on top of that?
That's a good question, because I can double check. I can ask Pip, because Pip is someone I know at the council who does all the data stuff. On Somerset Intelligence, a lot of what they've got on there, which is their like data in Insight website, which is not quite up to date. a lot of that is pulling from like national sources. I don't think
Yeah.
they then go out and do their own surveys or anything.
But you would
Because the
think
national
even,
stuff goes so granularly.
yeah, but you would think Glastonbury Town Council, that would be like high on their priority list, wouldn't it? To have
Yeah.
that localized data of knowing where support and funding should go within their own area so that they can prioritize what they do.
Yeah, that's why they're putting all this money into wellbeing, isn't it? So you've got in fact the surgeries have got involved in that as well, haven't they? The wellbeing centre that's going to be in that derelict building by the side of the Abbey there and at the back of the town hall.
Yeah.
So they're sinking quite a lot of that funds into there. And then of course, fortunately, you know, Fusion decided to say when they saw the pot of money and figures, not bitching or anything, but they were on the move before that. And of course, all that money is going to be hopefully invested into Tor. I mean, it's all very slow coming off the mark because of how much the building costs have come up, which is really frustrating because what's happening in the meantime, there's no provision whatsoever. It's really rubbish. I mean, they are quite lucky, I guess, on Windmill Hill because they've got the Egley Hall.
Yeah.
That they can use, but in the middle of town it's really limited. They're very small halls unless of course they can use the town hall. You know,
and the school isn't utilised for anything after school since their leisure provider moved out of there, and they've just got, you know, new PE staff going in. I'm getting really distracted because have you seen Imogen? She's like literally holding a cucumber and eating off half a cucumber.
Good for you.
It really is. Just literally never seen anyone eat a cucumber that way. Like slices, yeah, but like literally using it as like a carrot or literally gonna have to try that now.
Really good.
You carry on, mate. So not for me.
Thank you, Jo, Annabelle. I will go and have a look, and if you can ask your friend Pip, Annabelle, if there's anything else, that would be fab. Thank you.
And I'm also happy to sit down with you and Curtis if you want to, talk things through.
Brilliant. Yeah, we'll get our ideas out and then come back again with our why, who, what, and when. See what we think.
Sounds good. Welcome back, everyone. Now I've seen the cucumber. I can't stop looking at the cucumber. You distracted me as well. No. So now we're going to move on to measuring your impact. So when we think about that, there's the two parts. So there's the outputs and the outcomes. So as I said before, when we did that quiz, there's two things really that we're looking at that you typically measure in an evaluation. Outputs is kind of the scale of what you're doing. So how many sessions, how many people, and outcomes is more what you hope to get out of your program. So the people that come along, what do you want to happen to them, and what do you want them to feel like when they've come out of it. But just a quick aside, when we're thinking about data and when we want to collect things and measure things, typically there's two different types of data. There's quantitative and qualitative, so they have different purposes. Quantitative is really about all of the numbers, and it's thinking about how many, how much, how big. Whereas qualitative is interrogating the why. So think about why you're getting those numbers or why something is happening. So quantitative is always pretty much a number. Qualitative can be a real range of things. So it can be an observation, you go along and watch something. It can be words, that can be spoken word, or it could be written down words. It could be an image, it could be a video. So it can be a real range of things to really get to the why. And often someone just like replying to something in a survey online, they might be a bit briefer than they would if you spoke to them in person, or if you captured that in an image, or if you captured that in a video. There's, that phrase, an image can say 1,000 words, and there's a reason for that, because there's so many things that you can see in an image that you can't see in just a sentence. They have different approaches. So quantitative, you normally you ask some questions and you measure things, and then you kind of measure them against each other. Whereas qualitative is more observing, interpreting what you've got. So you can observe a session, an image, a video, and you can interpret the way people have spoken, the way people act, the way people behave, to really get a sense of why they might have said they feel a particular way about doing something. For quantitative, it's mainly around data analysis, and comparing different numbers or percentages with each other, whereas qualitative it's all about grouping together themes. So grouping together a theme, for example, one theme might be people felt happy going along to this because there was a particular person who delivered a session and they really got kind of the group happy and excited to be there. So you're thinking about what those themes are and how you group them together. All of that, the bit on really analysis and how you interpret data, is something I'm going to do in a session later on in July and August. And that will also include like how you visualize data and how you can kind of tell your story. So here it's just a bit of a background so that you can think about how you plan for those things and what data you might want to collect, but we're not going to go into detail about how you analyze it or anything like that. It's more just a background so you can plan for it. And the reason why I've kind of said it as well is because we're going to be looking at one of the columns in the next slide will be around methods of collection. So there are so many different ways you can collect data from people, but the three like most basic and simple ways, and often the others just kind of spin out of these, are a survey. So that could be in person, it could be telephone, it can be online, but it's basically a set of questions. Often the difference between a survey and an interview is a survey, it's more kind of closed questions. You might have a couple of open questions, but in general it's more closed questions and more around quantitative. An interview is you have some questions that you've got that you would like answers to, but you've also got a bit of a free flow. So you've got it's called semi-structure. So you've got some structure to it, but you've also got some way you might get taken in a certain direction because someone has an opinion on something or someone would like to share something with you, and it's okay to go down that direction and find out more. And then observation is going along and watching a project, taking photos, taking videos, like observing what's going on and having that as kind of giving the context of things. The reason why I put a really tiny tick next to qualitative and survey is that you can ask qualitative questions in surveys and open-ended questions, but what I would say is that can only tell you so much, and I would always prefer people to do qualitative questions either in person or on telephone, or some way that you can have a conversation with someone. You're always going to get more out of it if you can have a conversation with someone. I have kept the little tick in there though, because sometimes you might not have the capacity to do that, or there might be just so many people that you're trying to get to. That actually a survey that you can send out to loads of people is a better and easier and more cost-effective way of doing it, and you will still get something. You might just not get as much depth as you would if you kind of spoke to someone face to face or on telephone. So what we are going to do is we're going to go back to our projects and back into our breakout rooms, and we're first of all going to look at how we might measure the outputs from the project that we are looking at. So if I go back to the Move More Together example, one of the output objectives is that we want to match participants with volunteers. And so the outputs there is a matched participant and volunteer meeting regularly. So that's the output that we're aiming for. And then the indicator that matches that output is the number of matches. So how many matches have we got? And then the number of planned sessions taking place. So those output indicators are things that we want to measure, that we want to go out there and measure. We want to know how many matches we've got and how many sessions are regularly taking place. And how are we going to collect that information? So we're going to create a log of matches just on Excel, and just every time we get a match, we're going to put it in there. And we're also going to have a record, like a registration of planned meetings. So we've got a bit of a calendar. We've captured how many planned meetings that we've got. So then we'll have those two figures. We'll know the number of matches and the number of planned meetings. We're going to get the volunteering project officers working on it to do those. And what we're going to do with that information is that we're going to put that in quarterly performance, so that it kind of goes up to into the SAS quarterly performance, and that the board and SMT know what's going on, and also other people at SAS. We're also going to talk about it at the Active Ageing monthly meeting, so talk about what's going on and the scale of our project. And we might also share it externally with comms, particularly when we've got we hit kind of particular milestones, perhaps, of the number of matches. We might say, now I've got 10 matches, we'll move more together. Would you be interested in taking part? So that's a very simple, I guess, example of how you might then think about how you want to measure your outputs and where they go. So we're going to now go back to your breakout rooms, and if you just move along on the Jamboard, there will be one for you, a template for you, and it's now time for you to put it in for the project that you've been working on. You have 10 minutes to do that, and then we'll talk about it afterwards. Hayley, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so on the outputs, because you were just talking about quantity and qualitative, so are those all quantity ones, you know? Yes. How many and everything? So do you just, in our outputs, you just want that to be quantitative information? Yes. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, exactly. So the outputs will all just be quantitative. Yeah. Right. Any other questions that will make sense? Yeah. So we'll go back to our rooms, and you'll have 10 minutes to 10 minutes to, sorry, I've just lost my breakout rooms. There we go. 10 minutes to go through the outputs, and then we'll come back together and just talk them through, and then we're going to do the same for outcomes as well. So that's where for the outcomes, you will probably want both quantitative and qualitative to capture those. So I'm going to open up the rooms. And again, if you have any questions, just let me know, and I'll pop it in and out of the rooms as well.
Yeah, that could be an expectation of the funding, couldn't it?
Mm.
Sorry, just talk about yourselves for a minute.
Did you want to share with everyone what you were talking about?
Yeah,
I thought we'd just done that.
Yeah. Are you talking about the activity finder and how you might use that? Is that?
Yeah, that was part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And what did you work out? Is it possible to use it, or?
So basically, so I can hear an echo of myself. Joe, can you mute yourself?
Sorry.
I don't know if it'll work. Okay.
Ah, lovely. Yeah, sorry. Yes, so we were looking at measuring the activities that were from a specific leisure centre before we like ran our initiative, and then afterwards, and you see if you could see like an increase in the things that they offer. So you can put a postcode in, but the narrowest sort of distance you can do is within 1 kilometre. So, for example, we were just looking at Frome Leisure Centre, and you can see the things that they're doing at Frome Sport and Fitness, but it's also picking up things in the community hospital as well as like the health walks. So you can, but depending on how many things are listed on the activity finder with each, like Taunton, for example, it would be a nightmare to try and do that. But for some of the smaller towns, that you could probably do it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks for that, Grace. That's really useful to know. So I'm going to now move on to looking at outcomes. So as I said before, we've got the two different things. We've got the outputs, which is measuring kind of how many people are going along, how many activities are you delivering, whereas the outcomes are really what are the people getting out of it from what they're doing. So I've got an example here. So for Move More Together, the outcomes, like what is the overall aim that we want to achieve? And it's that we want to increase the activity of inactive adults over the age of 50. So this is one of the aims. There's multiple aims for this programme, but we're just using one here. The outcomes that we would want to see is that participants are more active. They feel they can embed physical activity as part of their routine. So they're not just more active, but they feel like it can be part of them. And they feel more able to try new and different things. So not just doing the same thing, but they feel like they've got the confidence to try new and different physical activities. So the things that we would want to measure are the activity levels, the number of times a participant is physically active per week, but also their openness to trying new physical activities. So when we think about like quantitative versus qualitative here, so the number of times they're physically active, that's a quantitative measure. But the openness to trying new physical activities, that might be more of a qualitative thing. So it might be something we find out by talking to someone about how they feel and how they felt at the beginning and how they feel now about trying new things. It'd be more like talking to them and drawing that out of them, rather than saying someone is open or they're not open. It's not really like that with that indicator. And how we might go about collecting those, we might collect levels of activity during the registration process and then collect it again during or at the end of the programme, depending on how long they're with us. If it's a relatively short programme, we might just do it at the start and the end, but we also might do it during if it's a longer one and we want to see the progress. We'd also think about doing ongoing qualitative feedback from both the volunteer and the participant. So hearing what the volunteer is saying, what their thoughts are on how it's going with their participant and how they feel that their participant's getting along, but also having conversations with the participant about how they feel their physical activity has improved and how open they are to trying new things. Again, it would be the volunteer and project officer, and we'd think about doing it at registration and probably periodically throughout. And again, we'd think where we'd like that to go. So again, quarterly performance. We'd also put it in and talk about it with our wider team, the active ageing team, see if there's anything that we've learned that we could share with them. And also external comms, we might want to share kind of the outcomes of the programme externally to different people. Does that all make sense? Yeah. So back over to you to do the same now, but for outcomes. So thinking about the people that your programme or your project is supporting, what are the aims of it? What do you want those people to get out of it? And then how might you go about measuring that and collecting that information? So I'm going to take you back into breakout rooms for 10 minutes. So we'll come back around 10 past, if not just before 10 past 12. It was lovely.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for that, everyone. How did people find that? I know Alex and Joseph, you were saying it was a bit more of a challenge for your particular project that you picked. What about others? How did you find it? Jane, what about your group? How did you find it?
It was a little bit more challenging than the original one. But yeah, I think we managed to put it in okay. It's just adapting the thinking. I think last time round we weren't distinguishing between outputs and outcomes.
Yeah.
And I think automatically you swing towards an outcome, don't you? It's very easy to look at numbers and figures, rather than thoughts and opinions and feelings as well.
Yeah.
So I think we did it okay.
Yep. Great. So we're now just going to move on to the final one, and this one is around using your findings. So in the ones that you just filled in, one of the columns was around how you might use your findings for those particular, outcomes or outputs. But here we're going to talk about like more widely what you do with kind of everything that you're pulling together to tell the story of your program. There's loads of different ways you could use your findings, and I guess there's 4 different pockets that we like to look at. There's reflecting and learning, so often that's throughout a project. There's reporting, often there's something at the end that you want to share. There's tracking progress to see if you're on track with what you wanted to do. And then there's kind of sharing the findings and how you share them and where you share them. So reflecting and learning is using what you learn to adapt in real time, I suppose, and improve your project. But also you might want to reflect and learn with other people that are outside of your project. Tracking progress is reviewing your data regularly to track your project's progress. So if you've got a project that's going on for a year and you've got an aim of getting 100 people involved, you might want to track that throughout the year to make sure you're kind of on track. Reporting is reporting anything essential. You can do that to your funder, internally, externally, partners of interest, anyone that you think might be interested in reporting. And reporting can look like very different things. It can look like a big report, but can also look like an infographic, for example. I know Leanne did a 2-page infographic that she wanted to share with the partners, and it had everything that she wanted on there, summary of kind of everything they've been doing. And sharing, so a lot of all of this ways of using your findings is kind of going down really to that sharing point of like, who do you share it with, how do you share it, and how do you tailor it to show what you've been doing. And that's where our lovely comms colleagues come in and help us with the sharing and making everything look lovely for us. So as an example, as Move More Together again, we've got reflecting and learning. So what will we be doing? So we might be doing a learning log for each active aging meeting. So there we're kind of sharing with our, we are filling in a log which says kind of what's gone well, what hasn't gone well, what have we learned from that, and what next. And we might include some data on outputs and outcomes to kind of showcase some of the answers to those questions. We might want to share that with the active aging team, particularly if they're working on something similar, to share kind of some of our learnings to help them think about their projects and what they might learn from ours. We might also want to put it in quarterly performance as well, to share more widely, and when we're going to do it on a monthly basis. So it's a really like basic way of kind of planning for how we might want to use our findings when we get our findings. So what we're going to do is we're just going to spend 10 minutes, and on Jamboard I've put the 4 circles in each of your slides, but you don't have to do all 4. Perhaps just pick 1 or 2 that you think would be important to you for how you might use your findings, and then think about what you would do, who you'd aim it at, and when you would do it. So this is really about, once you've got all of that information, all that data, or whilst you're doing, you're doing your project, what do you want to use your findings for, and who do you want to see those findings, and when do you want them to see it? Does that all make sense? Yeah. Okay, one last breakout. So we'll come back around 25 past, I think, so then we can wrap up. We've got 5 minutes to wrap up, so I'll just open the breakout rooms again.
Areas as well.
Yeah. So I think that might be a shout out then to do like a
Definitely.
Users, can you make 30 minutes to come in and give a shout out about who you're working with in Glastonbury?
Yeah. That would be a really good idea.
Well, thanks everyone. We're all back together again. So we've only got a couple of minutes left, so I just wanted to wrap up really and say thanks for coming along. Does anyone have any thoughts or questions that they wanted to finish with? Happy to answer any questions now, but also happy for people to kind of go away and try this out again and then come back again. So feel free to share anything that anyone's got.
I think it'll be useful because usually we have to hit the ground running. That is the nature of SASP. So I think it would be really good to have that tool to help us forward when we're, because they'll just say, oh, this is what we want. And you're like, right, you know, and like Hayley was saying, it's nice to know you've got, you know, perhaps people that have already worked in those areas that you can come to as well. So it makes you think about it a lot more logically than perhaps before.
I definitely like the online training as opposed to in a big room. I don't think we've got a big enough room at SAS, have we, for us all to sit down comfortably and be together. Enjoyed like the online a lot better, I think.
Oh, did you? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was quite hot in that room, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
it was. Yeah. And I think you're always itching to get back to your desk to do what you're doing. Whereas when you're at home, you've got your day planned, you know what's happening, and you haven't been interacting with conversations and stuff because you've met someone in the office and got behind. Whereas at home, you know, like you plan your day better because there's no one to interrupt you.
So do you think it worked okay on online? Because I was a bit worried having to change it online.
Yeah.
That's very good, Annabelle.
Yeah, definitely.
It's like 2 hours has gone really quickly.
It has. Yeah.
Yeah, it's felt really engaging the whole 2 hours as well.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good to know. Great. Well, I'll share everything with everyone afterwards, and really hope that people can then use it just generally and like every time we're getting something new coming up or you want to plan anything, but also happy to help people use it as well. So if you have got something coming up and you want to try it out, I'm happy to help with that. Don't feel like you're on your own. But yeah,
I feel like it needs to be a running program as well because we're getting so many new people coming through. So I really think it's really useful for them to have this training and information because it really will help them, particularly going with a brand new project. I really think it would be useful.
That's a really good point, Jo. And actually that's something maybe I'll talk to Kate really about induction and things about like when to do this type of thing, because I think that is a really good point. We've always got new people, haven't we? And this being like early on in their SASP lifetime of use, I think. Thanks for that, Jo. Great. Well, thanks everyone, and I hope you have a good rest of the day. I hope you're not too hungry. Ready for lunch. And I'll speak to you all soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Annabelle.
Thanks,
Cheers,
Annabelle.
guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
And you all.